Hello, I'm Anna Ferris, and on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon, Technology and Claims Management, Evolution or Revolution, hosted by Innovation Group. Just to run through a few housekeeping points, you should all be muted and your cameras turned off. The video will be available on our website after the event, hosted by YouTube. And following the event, we'll email you for your valuable feedback, which will help build the programme for our future events. If you'd like to ask a question, please submit your questions via the chat button at the bottom of your screen. As this session is a discussion format, you can submit questions throughout the session rather than waiting until the end. Today's interactive session covers the use of technology in claims management. And now I'll hand over to Simon, who'll be chairing the session.
So good afternoon to you all. Welcome to this roundtable discussion focused on the use of technology in claims management, evolution or revolution. So the sharper ones in the audience today will quickly spot that I was not down to host this event. It should have been our very own Gary de Groot, but I'm pleased to inform you that his wife gave birth to his first child yesterday, a healthy baby boy called Tobias. So he quickly passed on today's hosting to me. It's amazing what people will do to get out of their duties. And one other small change today is that Andrew cannot make it. So we have drafted in our experienced digital project manager, Charlie Davies. So my name is Simon Powell. I've worked at the Innovation Group as the commercial director since 2018. And prior to that, I've been in claims for over 30 years. So man and boy, working for Ensley and Zurich, managing large claims operations. And when I started over 30 years ago, we were actually on paper files. So it's really fascinating to just see how technology has sort of evolved over the years. And I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Just wanted to give you a very quick overview of innovation, as some or many of you may not have heard of us. So Innovation Group have been managing critical incidents in the car and home on behalf of some of the world's leading insurers, brokers and MGAs for over 20 years. We're able to provide a unique offering that combines our end-to-end claims capability, world-class supplier network and sophisticated technology platforms. And that is supported by our outstanding people. We are designing the future of claims management, and we're called the Innovation Group because of our dedication to seek new and innovative aids that assist our claims handling process. You know, we're also on this digital journey, and we've got some exciting new initiatives that we've either brought into the business recently or we will be launching over the next few years. That's just a little bit of information around Innovation Group. Overview of the session and obviously the key objectives that we're trying to get out from today. Number one, to understand where the digital customer journey is headed. Number two, self-serve versus human touch. Where do you draw the line? Number three, understanding the benefits of automation. And number four, automation versus employee enrichment and retention. So we've got a really great panel for you today. So without further ado, I was going to pass over to Paul Khatri, so as you can give an introduction, please.
Thanks, Simon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Paul Khatri, as Simon said. I'm the UK Transformation Director for Innovation Group. Been with the organisation now for about 18 months, and I've worked in the claims industry for the best part of 20 years. So previously worked at AI Claim Solutions, which were then purchased by Quindel, and then latterly Slater Gordon Solutions. Have also worked in the medical legal area and also at Conveyor Insurance. So like Simon says, today we're going to talk about some of the exciting stuff that we're doing in digital transformation from an Innovation Group perspective. But I think, you know, we'd very much like to get your views and opinions and where you think the market's going as we go through the session. So, you know, I would like to stress that, you know, please feel free to collaborate. It's not us with all the answers projecting on you what we think is the future of the market, because you know, there's going to be that many twists and turns over the coming months and years. It'll be good to, you know, hear a mixed set of views from you guys. So very much want this to be an interactive session as we move forward. I'll hand over to Charlie.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Charlie. I'm fairly new to Innovation Group. I'm the digital product manager for the home claims journeys. My background is actually working, so I've moved across from the insurer side. So my background is a direct line group in Saga, where I was working on the motor digital products there, and sort of my proper background kind of is within data. So it's been really interesting. So I've been kind of like heavily involved in kind of like getting the customer feedback and looking at the data and doing the research on how we optimize our journeys moving forward. So was a fairly fresh face to the insurance industry as a whole. Obviously not as much experience as Paul or Simon there, but you know, it's been a lot of research has been gone into this, and so it's really interesting to kind of get into the heart of this where claims is. So I'll pass on to Paul, is it now?
Yeah, please.
Thanks. Yes, I'm Paul Sell. I've been in the insurance industry for over 23 years. Most of that served with Aviva, where I left a couple of years ago, and now work as a director at Service Certainty. Really pleased to be here today. We've been doing some fantastic collaboration with Paul, Charlie and the team over Innovation Group, creating some pretty exciting solutions all around the topic we're talking about today. So really pleased to be here.
Okay, fantastic. So great to have you on board, Paul, Charlie and Paul. I mean, you know, we've got some fantastic questions just to kick off from, really. And, you know, like Paul mentioned, you know, we want to make this an interactive session. So please do come forward with any kind of questions that you've got as well. So I think we're going to kick off the first question. The first question we're going to ask to the panel is, how have insurer and MGA's demands for technology changed over the last year? And again, Paul Khatri, I'm going to come to you first just to kick off that discussion if I can, please.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think if you think about, you know, what's happened over the last year, I mean, I don't want to raise the dreaded COVID, but I just have. That's obviously, you know, I think changed the way in which we as individuals have approached our working lives, but also I think in terms of how consumers have then had to adopt their interaction with the likes of, you know, insurers or indeed, you know, online shopping to a certain degree. I think from an insurer's perspective, I don't think their requirement for digital solutions has changed necessarily. What I think it's probably meant is that they've had to accelerate some of their strategy in that area. So I think from what we're seeing in collaboration, talking with our supply chain and with insurers and brokers, is, you know, there's very much an emphasis now on pushing the self-service direction from a policyholder or claimant perspective. And that's not to say that that wasn't there 12 months ago or 18 months ago, but I think, you know, there's more of a necessity to get those sorts of things in place more quickly. So when we talk about self-service, I think, you know, we all know today we buy policies of insurance online, and in some insurance or broker instances, we can register a claim online via a web page. But then I think the journey becomes checkered when, depending on who you're insured with, as you move through the claim journey. So, you know, in some instances you'll receive letter updates, and they could be in the post or through email, or it could be you don't receive any updates and you've got to hang on the phone for 15, 20, 30 minutes to try and get an update. So I think what we're seeing from a requirements perspective on the insurer and broker side is that need to have omni-channel update capability throughout the claims journey, and that's not just about, you know, sending a message saying your repairs are in flight or, you know, we need to contact you. I think that's allowing the customer effectively all of the tools at their fingertips. So whether that be, you know, providing documentation, whether it's obtaining images to support their claim and being able to submit those, whether it be videos or pictures. It's the ability to, you know, undertake fast track settlements, so being able to digitally have a claim settlement proposed to you, and you being able to then effectively accept that settlement and receive a digital payment rather than waiting for 7 to 10 working days for someone in an office to sign a check and send that out to you. I think that play that plays into the insurer and the broker hands, in that they, you know, they do want to offer that better customer journey. But if we think about it in terms of operating costs, they've also got one eye on the fact that if I haven't got policyholders calling into me for that exception handling or for chasing things up, and they can do it online, then I need less FTE overhead in terms of servicing those claims. So I think it's a mutual piece from a self-service perspective. I think if we look inwardly within the claims operations within the insurers and brokers, I think there's still a lot of technology aspects that they want to look at in terms of improving their operating model. So things like RPA, so robotic process automation, being able to automate those simpler tasks based on information that's coming in. Again, AI has been, you know, I've been in the industry, as I say, 20 years. AI and machine learning is always bandied around as being something that is needed. But I think, you know, in 80% of cases, people don't necessarily know what they want from it. They know they just want it. So I think it's making sure we've got, you know, well-defined business cases that support that AI and machine learning aspect without, you know, effectively degrading the quality of the role that the individuals play with their technical expertise. So I think it's effectively supporting key decision making rather than eradicating humans being able to do that. I think we'll come on to that a bit later, don't we, Simon, around, you know, what is the balance of that in terms of, you know, enrichment for staff versus, you know, risk and reward for the organisation. So, you know, to sum up, I don't think it's changed materially over the last 12 months. I think people are just putting the foot on the gas more aggressively than they may have done previously. So I don't know if anyone in the audience has got any questions, or anyone from IG wants to add anything to that.
Well, I'll just quickly add. So I was at Direct Line during, you know, the kind of the COVID outbreak, and I know from an insurance perspective, it really just kind of sort of talked to what you're saying. We always wanted to push more online, and as an industry, we do want people to be able to do what they need to do online. We don't want to have to force people over, you know, to call us. People don't necessarily want to call us, and people don't necessarily have the time to call us. But when the claims industry was getting, you know, really hammered from a travel perspective during the beginning of the outbreak, and we were having to move all of our call centres to working from home and having to do this massive shift in way of working. It really did accelerate what we're doing. We were really having to rely very hard on our self-service capability and our digital capabilities from a new business perspective as well, to enable ourselves to actually continue to run the business whilst we were kind of fighting fires a little bit. So it was always in the plan. You're right, and this really did kind of accelerate the pace of change through the necessity that we had in kind of adapting to this new way of life, really.
No, thanks, Charlie. And just got a question as well, which I'm more than happy to kind of throw open to the panel. But, you know, do people think self-service is a key consumer requirement? And if so, do the markets serve that requirement well today? So I think that's a good question. So Charlie, I don't know whether you want to answer that, and perhaps we can pass over to Paul as well on that one, Paul. So
I wrote the question. I thought it was
well, there you go then, in which case, yeah. Can't see who it's from.
Charlie, did you want to go first, Charlie, and I'll then?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
First
So
question, Paul.
it's yeah, great question. So yeah, there is the need really for self-service in the industry today. There really is the need, and I think, you know, looking at from what I can see so far, and from kind of working with working with customers, insurance customers, and working with the data, and kind of looking at the experience that we're doing market research, the capability does not meet the demand yet across the industry, and I think we're aware of that as an industry so far, and I think we're coming to terms with that, and we're kind of hopefully as an industry, especially in the UK, you know, learning that, you know, we really need to kind of step up our game with this. So we've got, you know, you see a lot of it with new business, and I've seen this certainly in the industry in my time so far, that we invest quite heavily in kind of getting the business in, but we kind of, as an insurance industry, we kind of almost forget about the customer experience for claims, and claims really is the heart of what we do. You know, it's why people purchase insurance, you know, and sometimes we kind of forget that we are a business of risk, but we end up kind of focusing more on the risk and shift the balance more to the risk, and actually forget about the business side of it, and end up actually shooting ourselves in the foot. You know, we talk about seamless digital journeys, and I think one of the things that we miss a lot in the insurance industry is that seamless digital journey for claims, because really, whilst we see that you know, that from a new business perspective, you see that instant reward, that instant return. What people kind of miss sometimes is actually the value that a great claims journey gives us from a retention perspective. And that's really, especially, you know, the recent pricing challenges that we've been having, and kind of the fair pricing commitment, you know, and you know, the kind of the challenge back to insurers from the FCA is really kind of driving that need for us to make sure that our retention is absolutely on point. And that comes directly from the claims journey. So there is a need certainly for it. But as an industry, I think we're still behind as a market overall.
Is it, Charlie, as well, flexible solutions? So is it around the fact that, you know, especially from a sort of first notification of loss, you know, depending on the product, depending on whether you're reporting a motor claim or a home claim, you know, quite often with a motor claim, somebody might actually want to speak to an individual because they've got very specific questions, whereas perhaps a straightforward home claim, they might be happy to do an electronic notification. So do you think there's some, it's about flexibility and giving the consumer what they want?
I absolutely believe it is about flexibility, and we are seeing that today. And once again, you know, through our focus in new business, you can see that sort of growth for microinsurance, where people need that new level of flexibility. If you think about kind of, you know, 30, 40 years ago, right, when you were doing a claim, or when you were buying your insurance, you would know somebody, you would know, you know, Bob, whatever, right? And you would say, okay, Bob, I need to insure my house because I'm worried that it might fall down. And Bob will go out to his network of people that he knows, this kind of interpersonal network, and he'll speak to his guys, and he'll say, okay, right, you know, come in, Charlie, I've got your, you know, I've got your quote for you. I know what you need. And he'll sit you down and he'll walk you through what you've got and what you're not covered for. And he'll say, okay, this is it. You want to sign? And, you know, that's kind of it. And I know that I'm covered. And the key things that we had there was that interpersonal connection and that explanation, which gave us that reassurance that we knew what we were covered for. Mm-hmm. And the ability for us to be able to say, so on our behalf, we would be able to have the contract negotiated so that we could make sure that we were covered for what we needed. We said, I need to be covered for XYZ, you know, and XYZ would come back to us in a policy document, which would be explained, you know. And so I suppose there's two elements to it. There's certainly the flexibility part of it, where we need to be able to cover just what we need. You know, we need better value for money as society today, really. You know, we're always looking for the best value for money. And this is where you see kind of like the price comparison websites have really capitalized on giving us an easy way to find the best value for money. But really, at the same time, we also need to be able to understand what we're being covered for. And this is a huge problem that I see in the insurance industry, and from customer feedback and from the research we do. It's a big gap. So, for example, the average reading age in the UK, according to adult literacy studies, is about 10. And the average reading age, according to the Flesch-Kincaid scale of our policy documents, is university level. So how are we expecting our customers to understand and be reassured what they're getting when we're not able to explain it to them in a way they understand? And that was the things that we were getting back then. and we haven't brought that back. They haven't brought that on the journey, those key requirements on the journey that we have done, you know, for the rest of it. So we've gone online through the ability that we have, through the facilitation that we have through technology, but we haven't brought those human elements with us, you know.
No, thanks, Charlie. And Paul, you haven't had to say yet, but Paul Sell, do you want to come in on that on the back end?
Yeah, just to reiterate Paul's point of earlier, I think on the topic of this session, evolution or revolution, I think that what we said is all the technology advancements in the last year come from a point of evolution. Everyone had it in their plans, everyone knew where they needed to go, looking at the world around us and knowing that every other industry has done this already. But it's probably felt like a revolutionary pace in the last 12 months, just because I think COVID heightened not only the organisational needs to do things remotely, as Charlie mentioned, but also the customers' need to do things remotely, because they know they didn't want people coming into their house to look at damage or whatever it might be in the situations of lockdowns. So I think there is definitely a demand for self-service. And if you look at most things you can do in your life now, whether that's ordering something on Amazon or paying something on your mobile banking app or booking your vaccine jab, they're all done within a couple of clicks and really, really easily. So I think what we've got to do is take all that complexity Charlie's just referred to and see how we can almost hide all of that to make it a really easy journey for the customer. You can make it effortless for the customer. You can gather the information you need to gather to review the claim, and then make informed decisions and pay them quickly, like we touched on. And that's some of what we've been working with Paul and the team on iValidate. You can make it easy for the customer whilst also getting all the accuracy and evidence that you need to make sure you're making an good informed decision on a claim. But yeah, absolutely, I would second what's been said already.
Okay, no, thanks, Paul. And I think thank you guys. Really, really some good answers to that question and some good insight. So I think we'll move on to question 2. So question 2 is, what specific digital support are policyholders looking for within their customer journey? Obviously, we touched on that slightly within the previous question, but let's try and get into that in a bit more detail if we can. So Charlie, I'm going to come to you first on that question, if possible.
Sure. So I think some of the stuff that we've, you know, as I said, we've kind of already gone on is a clear explanation. So the 2 key things that they need right now is clarity and capability. So the specific things that I've seen customers need is better understanding. So one of the things that drives customers to call us and drives customers offline is lack of understanding. So not being able to understand what they're covered for, and not being able to understand, you know, what they're not covered for, and so on. And actually, when we've done optimization work on this, what we've found is a clear differentiator, a clear movement of customers online. And then the second part of it is the capability. So the ability to self-serve, the ability to put a claim through, the ability to add their photos, their videos, their claims, and this information, you know, the ability to track their claims. You know, why shouldn't I just, you know, and I know this stuff exists today. We have our portal and so on. And so, you know, all I want to know is just, how's it going? What's going on, you know, with my claim? I don't want to have to be, you know, I don't want to have to call, but a lot of the industry doesn't have this today, you know, and it's almost, yeah, this is, I was discussing it, you know, the other day, and the reference was, it's almost like when you're tracking your parcel. You know, and it's just simple little things like that that just keep people informed. You know, is that capability. You know, we're not trying to change the customer experience in a way. What we're trying to do is make it easier for the customer to do what they need to do when they need to do it. You know, people are time poor. They don't have the same amount of time as they used to. You know, there's a lot more demands, social demands, work demands that we have. You know, work longer hours for one. And so we need to make sure that, you know, people can access their information when they need to, and they can do the things that they need to as well. They can log their claims, they can add different stuff. You know, what's to say that, you know, we have all this data. You know, what's to say that we can't just, you know, from an image say, okay, well, we know who you are. We know your policy information. We can validate you. We can validate the risk. We can validate the liability. from all this information, from just one, one picture, one video. This technology exists, and you've kind of got everything you need at just one click, as we're talking about, and then we can start the repair straight away, easy, and then we can, this is the thing. It's about using what we have in a better way, in a smarter way, to facilitate a quicker journey. And then that in turn, it returns back to us as an industry. We have shorter claims, so that's cheaper claims, or better cost management. We have better customer satisfaction, we have better retention. So it's in our interest, really, to start using the data that we have in a smarter way. And so that, ties back to, an easier customer journey and a seamless customer journey as well.
Okay, no, agreed, Charlie. Thank you very much for that. So Paul Sell, any additional comments on that particular question?
No, I don't think so. I think Charlie's covered that well. I think specifically what customers want is to be able to notify they've got a problem easily, to be able to get someone to understand and remotely assess or validate that yes, it is a claim, and yes, this is what needs to be done, and or this is what you're due to have as payment, and then make that payment and resolve that with as little effort on their part as possible, without the need for someone to come into their space, particularly at the moment with COVID being around, and also to be able to then, going back to the point Charlie made at the very start, tell everybody else about what a great experience they had having to make a claim with said company, which, let's face it, is what this is all about, really, in creating a great experience at the time when they need it, in order for them to highly recommend that particular product or service or company to their friends. And I think the easier we can make that for customers with the solutions we've got at our fingertips now, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that reassurance. Sorry, Paul, carry on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say to your point, I think a lot of it comes down to ease to deal with as well, especially at a time, which is stressful, if you're involved in a claim. So, as an example, I probably order off Just Eat 3 times a week, which I know isn't great. But one of the great features I love is being able to click on it and see where the driver is. So we've currently just rolled out something in our property division whereby where we undertake drainage repairs, and what we're able to do is automate messaging based on customer preference in terms of giving updates as to what's happening with their claim. But one of the nice features about it is that when the engineers come in that day, they can actually click on a URL that we've sent to them to their SMS, which will effectively show them a real-time view of where the engineer is on their route for that day, so that they've got, I suppose, the confidence and trust that they know they are en route, rather than being told, oh yeah, we're coming this afternoon or we're coming tomorrow, and they're not quite sure. So again, I think, I appreciate it's a bit of a tenuous link with Just Eat, but I think it's trying to create solutions that I suppose resonate with what they're experiencing in their normal, in quotes, life. So it's not seen as an administrative or a burdensome process to have to engage with.
Yeah. Who wants the?
Go on, Charlie.
Sorry. I was going to say it's that not wanting to. It's about that. Customers want to manage their life, not their claim. They don't want to have to wait around. I mean, it's almost like, with those deliveries, it's kind of why do I want to wait around between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. or whatever, when I've got things that I need to do in my life. I'm already inconvenienced because I've got escape of water, I've got a claim that's ongoing, stuff is happening, I'm having to speak to people, I'm having to do stuff, and now I've got to wait around for somebody all day. It's about listening to our customers and saying, okay, this is how we facilitate you doing what you need to do.
No, I agree, Charlie. And let's not forget as well, in claims departments, there's a lot of people that are employed that are picking up chase ups and a lot of failure demand. And even Paul, with your comment, that's something that you enjoy doing, but as a result of doing that, and exactly what's happening, then you're less likely to then be ringing up claims departments or chasing claims departments for updates. And so I think it really gives the customer more of what they're actually looking for. Okay, so that was question 2. I'm going to move on to question number 3. So as the demand for technology increases, what risk factors do businesses need to consider, which is one part. And then the second part, how do we balance technology with the role of the individual? And that's the second part. And Paul Sell, that's a question which I'm going to come to you for.
Sure. I think from a risk perspective, there's a few things to consider. One, there's an awful lot of technology out there at the moment, and everybody wants something, as we've just been discussing. So I think first and foremost, understand what it is you need before you go looking to buy something. So to do the work on looking at your own business needs, your own processes, and really be clear on what it is you want to digitize or automate before you go engaging in the market would be my first point. Almost map out, what is the real value demand that's coming through in a claim, what is the failure demand, and don't just buy technology to automate something that shouldn't be there in the first place. Would be the first thing. I think then listening to staff, because generally they know what's good and what's not, and what needs to change and what doesn't, but also balance that with taking them with you on a journey, because sometimes they can't see where it is you want to go. And then I think also look at how you can come back to the second part of that question, how you can make the remaining role more valuable and more insightful and more enjoyable for the employee. So, most people that work in claims want to help customers and want to make decisions on claims. What they don't want to have to do necessarily is, input information from system A to system B and process this from A to B. If you can remove some of the non-value tasks and make the remaining claims role really enjoyable and valuable, I think you'll have better engaged staff, as well as obviously lower costs and hopefully better engaged customers. But I think you need to, in terms of risk, understand clearly what it is you need before you start looking to implement solutions.
Okay. It's an important one, though, Paul, I think, and rightly so. Certainly, within claims departments at the moment, there's a lot of kind of what may be considered kind of admin type tasks, and therefore, if you can eradicate some of those, then actually you're not only getting more from your workforce, but you're making it a more enjoyable job for them as well.
Well, I agree, and that's the first thing to look at is, do you actually need to do it in the first place? Then of the ones that you do need to do, how can you make that as simple and automated as possible? And then of the key decisions you need to make, what information can you gather in an easy way to make that decision process easy, as we were just touching on earlier, and what media can you collect easily from the customer? They're quite happy to provide information to help their own claim move forward, and therefore, as long as you've got that information date stamped, time stamped, you've got all the appropriate extra information, so that it's been, they're real images and videos of the problem, and you can ensure that you're happy with the validity of the claim. Well, then why wouldn't you process that as quickly as possible? That's what everyone wants.
Great. Okay. Paul, Charlie, any more on that particular question?
They're looking from me, Simon. Now.
No, I think it's a fair statement, and I think it's what we're trying to. It's what really the heart of automation is, to be honest, is facilitating people to be able to do their job in a more engaging and better way. People don't. Nobody wants to have to look at the same spreadsheet every single day for the same information and scan the same stuff. It's really enabling us, and kind of lifting up our workforce to be able to make better decisions and to kind of do more or do work that kind of has more value overall for their role and for the company. And I think there is almost a level of responsibility that we have in the industry to make sure that we don't kind of leave our consultants behind, but we actually use this automation to empower them to make the decisions that they need to make on our behalf, so that we can get the best value out of them overall, and out of our claims decisioning.
Charlie, on that, I mean, where do you think we kind of currently are at the moment, maybe in terms of what you've seen recently? How far forward are we on to this stuff?
I think as an industry, I think there is a bit of a way to go, I think, and I think there is a heavy reliance on a lot of manual tasks. I And this is once again where we've you know, as an industry in the UK, a lot of it has been kind of focused heavily towards the new business side, and claims has kind of been left behind almost as kind of the workhorse really of the organisation. And so this is, you know, this is kind of almost like a call to arms really for us to say, okay, we've got an opportunity here. We need to make sure that we change our mindset, and we understand that really, you know, the heart of our business is through claims and risk, and we need to make sure that we are meeting the same demands for the customer through our digital journey as we have been doing through our offline journey as well.
Okay, no, great. Good, okay, that probably brings kind of question 3 to a close. I've had one question so far, which we'll come back to at the end, but please do fire your questions through. We've got the guys that are eagerly awaiting some response on this. So 4th question, and further really to question 1, further to that, what are your views on AI to support underwriting and claims management? And Charlie, that's one that I'm going to pass to you to kick off, please, if possible.
Sure. So this is some of the stuff that we're kind of working on, or some of the stuff that we implemented whereas before, and some of the stuff that we're kind of working on today. I think AI is a really, really broad term. You know, automated intelligence. A lot of people kind of get hung up on the intelligence side and have this expectation that, you know, it's going to think like a human. It's going to be kind of, you know, this kind of neural networks approach to AI. But in reality, what we're expecting, and this is kind of where we need to, and kind of alluding back to Paul's point at the beginning, we need to understand what we're trying to achieve with AI, you know, and through machine learning and through smart logic. You know, it can be anything from, you know, inputting a decision tree just to make a decision easier, or facilitate a decision, or it could be down to machine learning where we input a model to enable us to kind of forecast, you know, forecast where we need to go, or predict variances and erroneous data. And I think those are the kind of things, you know, we've got a lot of options as an industry, and we kind of haven't really explored you know, the opportunities and kind of really thought about, okay, how actually do we use this? And really what we need to be thinking about is smart decisioning and how we use our data in a smarter way. So some of the things that we can be doing, and some of the things that we should be doing, is using, you know, wealth of data, an absolute wealth of data, is looking about how do we better use this data to forecast where we should be in the future and what we should expect in the future for a number of different things. And then we also need to be looking at how we use this data in a better way to forecast our perils and our peril management, so that we can best give people, you know, the premium policy they want, but then also understand kind of like with them when we're forecasting kind of repairs and forecasting, you know, kind of availability for people, how do we manage that? So actually really we should be integrating it in all layers really of our claims management process. But what we need to be aware of is that it's not a solver, it's not a solution, it's a facilitator of our decision making. So we need to be able to work with it to give us, you know, decisions to judge, to make the outcome, or to judge the outcome of. And that's some of the thing that we were talking about with our workforce and working with our you know, our consultants and underwriters, is how do we present this information back in a way that we can make informed decisions. And so that's where we need to really kind of focus our machine learning and AI in, is how do we get smart about our processes and our data.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think, you know, not necessarily specific with AI or machine learning, but it's about that data enrichment piece as well. So, you know, if you speak to, you know, a claims director and you're talking about, you know, providing an F&O service, you know, I need you to capture road conditions or weather conditions at the time of the accident. A policyholder doesn't want to be sat on the phone or online entering that information. you could argue, is it actually that important in terms of the outcome of the claim or making a decision on the claim? But if you do think it's important, that is important, could we not have a real-time link to, you know, BBC weather database or highways agency that enriches your claim notification based on the, you know, the attributes of, you know, the date the claim took place and its geographic location, and enrich that F0 journey so that, you know, you could say, well, actually, Mr. Policyholder, we've got that the road conditions were wet on that day, and there'd been an accident or whatever it might be, rather than, you know, asking the same mundane questions as part of that F0 journey. But again, that's just one element. But, you know, there's probably a number of data-rich sources out there, whether that be, you know, third-party real-time data sources or indeed historical market data. And I get that there's, you know, there's issues around GDPR and the ability to share data that's got, you know, personal information. But is there a market solution to having anonymised data that would help enrich decision making across the piece? You know, we could probably debate that one for many months and years, but I bet there's something as a market that could be done that, you know, sees you know, mass data sets being used for the greater good. But again, I suppose is, you know, there's probably a number of conversations to get us there.
I think that, you know, the best sort of things that we have with that already, such as Q and LexisNexis even, for example, you know, we know, you know, as people who work in this industry, we know that there are faults within this database, and we know that there is, it's about the reliability of the data, you know, as well, that, you know, we've got to make sure that we have this, and this is kind of where like the AI element comes in, and the machine learning element comes in, because for unreliable data, this is where, for example, like a random forest model, it actually inputs, you know, it can deal with uncategorized data. It can deal with data which is missing, which still help give you and still give you an output, and it can manage around that. So this is where that really comes in help in use. But I think the essence of what we're trying to do with AI, you know, is we need quicker, you know, smarter and consistent, like consistent decisions, and that's going to really benefit us as an industry moving forward. Is that level of consistency? You know, we are, as I said before, we're a business of risk. You know, our share price goes up and down based on our forecasts and how close we are to our budget, which is an interesting one for an insurance industry. But it's an interesting one. You know, you outperform too far, and actually that has a negative impact. You know, and so it's about consistency. And so if we can manage that with using AI, that's kind of the way I see it going.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, which is I think there's lots of complex things you can do with AI and machine learning, which I know you both touched on, but there's also a degree of relatively simple, consistent decision making. And that way, if you can, whether it's a total loss claim or windscreen repair or whatever it might be, in the AI solutions we've built before, it's mostly around presenting back whether or not that particular incident is likely or not, and therefore you're almost eradicating the variations at each end, because they're either definitely a yes or definitely a no, and you're putting a smaller volume of work to the people who actually can make their informed decisions using their expertise and using all the information you're giving them on decisions that perhaps are within a 40 to 60% bracket, and removing the two ends. That way you're sort of creating this, the beauty, if you like, of automation and AI is not only consistently making decisions on those at each end, but you're also then presenting information to the handler to make a more accurate decision on the ones in the middle.
And this is what we're kind of building at the moment, you know, is that automated decision making, that, you know, the next best question, for example, that helps us to determine in a more accurate way our decision making, and so that kind of, you know, it saves a lot of time, and it's about, once again, you know, getting to that why do we need to do it, is looking at our processes and kind of saying, okay, this is an onerous process, this is not the right customer journey. Okay, how do we automate it? But how do we automate it in a way that gives us a consistent result? It's about fitting kind of, you know, the customer need, you know, the technology and the business need, kind of getting into that heart of it. and saying, okay, so this is what we need to achieve.
No, good point, Charlie. So one question that we have got that's come from the floor, and please do keep your questions coming in. We've got sort of 5 or 10 minutes at the end where we'd like to ask some questions. So I've just had the kind of first couple come through, but there's one that relates to this question, Charlie, which we can try and cover off if possible. And it's, you know, with greater automation, how do you see the controls around fraud developing? And that's quite an interesting question because fraud's obviously key to this. So how do you see that developing?
That's a really, that's a really good question. And in terms of fraud management, so there's a lot of stuff that we've got. There's a lot of stuff we've got today that we're not necessarily using in the right or using in the most efficient way as an industry. So you've got kind of locale of claims repudiation and things like that. You've got documentation, but and this is another one, and I suppose it's kind of like when we're using AI for claims assessment and claims damage assessment, this is where you take out that level of ability for misrepresentation, and when we're looking at the decisioning and kind of using the using an enriched data set, as Paul was saying, this is where we take out the risk for misrepresentation moving forwards, which I know we kind of, as an industry, we feel a lot of that. And so by using automation in our imaging, in our image recognition and damage assessment, and by using enriched data through our data capture with the customer, we can kind of help tighten those controls.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there are a number of checks you can put in place from the very start in terms of things like when was a policy taken out, when was the claim made, how long has the customer been in policy, how many claims are made, all various databases that you can pull in, even credit scraping, lots of things you can do almost instantly to build a picture as a fraud indicator, and then all the way through the claim. Yeah, as we said earlier, they're providing you images and videos of the damage. Well, actually, let's exit stamp and let's make sure we understand where they were, what time they were taken, are they the right property, all that kind of stuff. So there's a number of things that technology gives you as fraud deterrence. It's just, to Charlie's point, making sure you capture them and bring them into the decision making, so as you don't, as you say, let it slip through the net with you.
Yeah, that probably works both ways as well, Paul, doesn't it? Because the fraud element, it's there to eradicate fraud, of which this, AI can certainly assist with. In the other way, you can use it to the advantage of the customer, whereby as a result of that AI, then you can actually speed up the
absolutely
life cycles, etc.
Assuming 98.9% of customers are not fraudulent, well, then we shouldn't be holding up 100% of claims to do fraud checks. We should actually be taking comfort from the information we do have to process as much as we can in the speed that genuine customers need them to be processed.
Yeah, and again, I think it's that data enrichment piece. So, could you do a real-time scrape at the point of ethanol to their Facebook profile, as an example? Have they talked about, any fraudulent activity, as an example? You could really reduce the timescale of investigations where you get, your positive ambers or reds. So, for me, I don't think automation increases the risk as long as you get it right. I think you've got to, you probably need to, I suppose, baby it for a period of time. So work it in parallel with your traditional processes, and then effectively turn the dial, so you get to a point whereby you've got that balance of risk versus reward.
Yeah. And this is where you're training. This is your period of training the machine, basically. And it's about also when you are training, the machine is only as smart as the data you put in. It's only just, in an odd way, it's only as smart as its master. So it's quite straightforward if you to build a random forest model to forecast or extrapolate claims likelihood or risk likelihood for a customer based on the data you've got, and you've got the risk data against it. It's, I suppose, the imperative behind this is ensuring that you've got the data integrity really tight before you we kind of sort of run it through the machine, and we've got a really good and a separate testing set as well, so that you can make sure that you've got a really solid model. But you know, from a machine learning perspective, that's kind of a straightforward.
Yeah, I think the key is not wait until it's perfect before you release it. I think you just got to get it out there and test it and learn and improve, rather than, you know, waiting till, you know, you're confident 100% of cases won't go through it, because some will go through the net.
Yeah, no, good. No, useful. And another question that's come from the floor from Andy, which it looks at this, but it looks at it from a slightly different angle, which I think is really good. So is there a concern that increased automation and technology within the claims journey could negatively impact vulnerable customers? And if so, how do we mitigate that concern?
That's a really interesting question, and especially with the kind of the intended focus on vulnerable customers, and making sure that we have, you know, the best workout practices as well, you know, going forwards. And I think when we're developing these digital and these online journeys, what we need to make sure that we're doing is that we are developing to the best workout practices, you know, so that we can facilitate the customer's needs, and also making sure, you know, for example, 1 in 5 customers are actually considered as having, you know, or considered as differently abled or have mobility issues. So we need to make sure, for one reason or another, you know, according to research from Scope. So we need to make sure that when we're building something, we're actually taking the customer's needs into account, and that also includes in the automation as well. So
you won't necessarily always know, will you, that they've you know, that they're a vulnerable customer. So I think what you've got to be careful to do is, when you're designing your automation for the masses, that you aren't inadvertently, you know, excluding a certain population of individuals. Yeah. But also, for me, it's then offering that flexibility, say omni-channel, so that, you know, if you are a vulnerable customer, you're not prevented from accessing organisations in the way that you want to. It's just saying that you don't have to go one way; you can go several ways. It might be that, you know, 90% of the population want to go one way, but, you know, the other 10 want to go across the other options that you've got available. So now, I don't necessarily think that automation or digitisation directly goes against vulnerable customers' wants and needs, as long as you're careful about how you do it.
Yeah, taking it into account and making sure that, you know, when we're talking about machine learning and we're talking about the data sets, that the samples that we're taking the data from is truly generalizable, you know, and so with a proper generalizable data set, we should be able to represent accurately the population when we're running these forecasting models.
Yeah, and, you know, there's things like, you know, your screen designs need to be done in a certain way, don't they? So as, you know, they're easy to use, and there's certain standards that you can build to, and it's just making sure that you're adopting all those things, isn't it?
Great.
I think you're right, Paul. Having the omni-channel options there, and then having the remaining people that you've got focused on those people that need to speak to people, and those that need to do things in the way they have to do them. That's absolutely fine. You don't need to exclude, as you say, exclude groups of people or exclude processes. If you can automate and digitize the vast majority, you should be able to then have the capacity to deal with those types of customers in a more caring way.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's great. Just conscious of time, so I think that kind of covers off the kind of 4 questions that we've got. We have just got one further question from the floor, which I just wanted to open up, and perhaps just a minute or so each on this one. But how do you think electric and driverless vehicles will impact the market going forward? Obviously, it's been talked about for quite a long time, but just be keen to get a quick view from you guys in terms of you know, where you stand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, Sam, I think it's a tough one to answer. You know, depending on who you're talking to, you know, we're going to have driverless cars everywhere in the next 10, 15 years. But then, you know, certain OEMs have talked about not having even their full fleet of electric cars until another 15, 20 years. So I think from a claims perspective, I think it's going to be quite a significant amount of time before there's any real change. And again, I think the sort of indemnification process from a driverless car perspective is still up for debate. You know, I think and again, you know, I've not necessarily read into this as recently as I maybe should have, but I think there's still debate around whether does the liability rest with the OEM, given that they've created the intelligence for the vehicle to work. Is it split with the insurer? You know, I don't know. So I think, you know, for me, it feels a bit too early to say what driverless cars means. And I think, you know, from a perspective of electric cars, unless, you know, you sort of cross-reference that with telematics and how much they overlap, you know, I don't think there's going to be much change in the near future, at least, anyway.
Okay, no, interesting, Paul. Don't disagree. Charlie,
Yes.
Paul?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things I think that I can see us that might have an impact possibly. Since the data part of it. So there's the data packages that we can work with, the telematics, which gives us a really, you know, I'm kind of really excited to get, you know, into this and get that really good view of risk. You know, as an industry, I think it will really help empower us. And then we've got so from our perspective, how the process works shouldn't really change, because our focus is creating a really, you know, a real seamless digital journey that facilitates the claim process. The only real thing that we're going to have to work on and manage with is almost kind of the way that the repair network is set up, you know, where we've got, at the moment, we've got very, you know, sort of standard repair network. We're going to, when you go out there, you can, you know, a person takes it into a repairer. As cars continue to get more and more technical, and complicated, you know, it's almost to the point where you don't need a mechanic, you need a C# developer, you know. And so it just kind of comes into that. It's just making sure that, you know, we are moving with the times and moving our repair network and making sure we're keeping up with the facility to process these, you know, in the way that we need to for the customer, in the timescales that suit them best, and the facility that suits them best as well.
No, thank you, Charlie. And finally, Paul, just come to you for closing comment on that.
Yeah, well, I think short term, obviously, some of the challenges that Charlie's just mentioned around the fact that electric vehicles, connected vehicles, are still a minority of the car park at the minute. So there's some complexity around being able to fix them, get the appropriate parts, update them, all the kind of things that are well trailed, really. I think medium term, it's a race for the data. So who controls the immediate data from the car on what's happened and when it's happened? That's going to ultimately change the commercial models, I would imagine, in the claims landscape, and probably already is. And then the longer term, I think Paul's right. You've got some outstanding questions around: will we see the reduction in accident frequency? We hope we will. Where does the liability sit, and all that kind of stuff that's probably still to be debated. But certainly we've got some challenges to navigate along the way.
No, agree, Paul. Really interesting one. Okay, well, thanks very much, guys. I mean, we're literally almost on 2 o'clock. So, you know, certainly on behalf of Innovation Group, really just like to thank Paul, Charlie and Paul for today. Hopefully we've gone through the questions, we've covered off the objectives, and we've been some really good discussions and views as well. So thank you for coming along and acting on the panel, and again for the questions that have been asked as well. It's it really meant it's been a really good interactive session. So thank you, everybody, and we'll pass back to the MGAA.
Yeah.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
Just for me to say a very big thank you to you guys from Innovation Group. That was really interesting discussion. I could see that discussion if we had the time going on and on and on, and in months' time. So perhaps we'll have to do another one in a few months and see if anything's changed.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone for joining us.